The very next weekend, you and I were talking about business, and you said, yeah, the Booma effect, blah, blah, blah. You just rattled it off. And I was like, wait, what? But like, I didn't understand that that's why you had that logo, and life attracts us to good things when we put good things out there. Building a business is awesome, but doing it the right way is even better, serving other people. And so I think it'll be fun to see how many people we can impact, not only through these conversations, but also through the business.
You're listening to The Booma Effect, the show for home service operators done with the churn and burn playbook and ready to build something that lasts. It's about doing good business with good people. Brought to you by RepCard.
Hey guys, it's Brad here. I'm so excited to be with you today. We're starting our first episode of The Booma Effect. It's our podcast that will help shed light on the other side of the hustle and grind mentality that you'll see everywhere in the home services space. So we're bringing to you myself and Jess Reagan, who is our CRO here at RepCard. We're excited to co-host this podcast and for future guests, but this first one is going to be just a host fest, man. We're going to just chop it up. So here we go.
We got this. Yeah, this is exciting. I know, Brad, you and I have talked about doing this for a while. And so just getting together, talking about the home services industry, like how we can make an impact and how we can do it the right way, because I think you and I have had long careers and we've been able to do that without compromising standards. And I think it stands as a good example of what's possible. So for me, like I'm kind of excited to hear, I guess the origin story, if you will, with you and RepCard. But like you started in door-to-door home service sales, right?
Yeah, started in 2010 was my first summer. I just got home from my mission, knocking doors for a few years. In 2010, had a buddy that just said, hey, come knock doors. I was trying to look for an opportunity to make some good money. Minimum wage was $12 an hour-ish. And I did the math. If I get one sell a day, I was selling pest control in Dallas with Vantage. Back then it was called Inside Marketing. And if I get one deal a day, it averaged out to $15 an hour. And I was like, dude, like I'm crushing it at that point. Like I'm above the standard. Most of my buddies were going to be tellers at a bank and stuff like that. So I was like, let's jump in. So I jumped into my first summer and sold two my first day. My first deal I sold below the minimum, so I didn't make a commission. But I went back, resold it, made the commission. Second day got two. Third day they're having me doing correlation. They're like, dude, tell everybody what you're doing. And I'm like in a group of 28 guys, and everybody was giving these numbers like, I'm gonna get 5, I'm gonna get 8 today, I'm gonna get 4. And I just got my measly 2. So I was like, why am I the one doing the correlation? Well, come to find out, like none of them were hitting numbers. So end of that summer, there were 6 of us left. I felt pretty proud of myself. I sold maybe 180 deals, finished at that time like top 5 rookie, and was just proud of sticking with it the whole summer after seeing 28 go down to 6 people, and just loving the fact that you can earn more if you want to hustle more and want to put in the hours. And I fell in love with that cycle. And came home and got into satellite TV sales and did that for forever. Got back into pest, did some solar, and it was a journey of about 12 years of door to door. So that's kind of the origin
when you first started out. You played sports in high school, right? And so, as far as your mentality goes, you went out and you sold 2 deals. You had to go back and re-sign a deal, which is that's kind of scary. What was your mentality going into, leading these correlations and, hitting the doors every single day? Was there a sit on the curb, 3 weeks in, I don't know if I can do this kind of moment, or was it always just straight ahead?
So, my day 3, so I get 2 the next day. Day 3, the day that they made me do that correlation and kind of go up in front of the group, and I felt didn't know what I was doing, but I just fumbled my way through it. I got a bagel that day. And it shook me. I was like, F this, I'm out, dude. I don't work for free. Kind of had this high standard for myself. And I never bageled again the rest of summer. I just told myself I'm not going to give up. And I broke the day into 3 days and just said, I'm going to try to just get a deal before lunch, a deal before prime time, and a deal or 2 during prime time. It was just not trying to overcomplicate it, but just you get dropped off at 9:45 in the morning. And I'm like, before I get picked up again, I got to get a deal. I put that pressure on myself during those windows, and I had the most deals. Morning sales. That's how I was able to like compartmentalize the days and try to win each segment, versus just trying to like look at the day as a whole. So that was kind of a hack or a trick that I did early on. But I
You
played.
were you were manipulating time is what you
Dude,
were doing. Breaking it into
yeah.
3 days, you 10x'd it.
I basically knocked for 7 summers that first summer,
Yeah.
dude. So when
Yeah.
I say it was in at 12 years, it was really like 2 years, but because I manipulated time, it really worked out for me. So my experience is just insane.
Did this lead into, so after your first summer, did that lead into management then and you started to kind of grow into leadership roles and stuff like that? Or
Yeah, at that time there was opportunities to go back and work for Vantage the next summer and to manage, and I kind of signed up for that, and then got into satellite TV sales in the off season. And that industry at that time, 2010, 11, 12, it was like in its heyday. And so I fell in love with that sale. It was like helping people save money on their TV bill and get them better quality. Same thing as fiber right now. And so did that for about 5 or 6 years, and yeah, just leaned into that opportunity. Got into management. Ended up owning my own dealer, and then evolved in that space. And it was amazing to see the opportunity that you could create for other people. I fell in love with just like helping that rookie sales rep go from like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know. What if I get a bagel? What if I don't? What if it doesn't work? And my thought or my challenge is always like, what if it does work? And I had seen what it did for me in my life with my finances and the opportunities. And I was just always like, what if it does work? What if it does work? And that was kind of like a fuel to my fire of sticking in door to door for so long, was just like helping other people win. And that's always a good strategy to just like help yourself win, is like focusing on others.
yeah, but you had an ownership mentality from early on. Like some of us, I spent a lot of years in the field building teams for small and large companies, and you quickly moved into ownership, kind of an entrepreneurial mindset, getting into the satellite dealership and then eventually owning your own branches and then eventually building RepCard. So do you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or is that just kind of in your blood in particular, or what led you to that?
Shoot, my dad's owned his own business forever. He's a general contractor, but I wouldn't say he's like a traditional entrepreneur, um, in the sense of like, he's the guy that wants to go in the field and just hustle and just kind of own his opportunity and be more of a free bird, and just not have like a boss, was what I would say was his mentality, versus like owning a business and building processes and systems and that whole operational side. He always had like a partner or somebody that could help with that side. And he brought value in just showing up in the field and like bringing relationships. I saw him build and carry and serve and give to relationships my whole life. Um, I'll start crying if I keep talking about him. But ultimately, I don't know exactly where it came from. I didn't think my mom also was like a very organized person. And I think some of that helps with just like trusting yourself that you can go in and be organized enough to try to be an entrepreneur and help and guide other people. And I don't know.
It might be a
I guess
small,
that's,
it might be a small thing, but like we talk about this a lot now as parents, right? Because now it's like, okay, well, how do we build the next generation of us, right? Like if we're a hard worker, if we've not compromised our standards, if we've been in a good place, how do we teach our kids that? So did you have chores? Did you have a lot of chores, and did your parents keep you on task? And is that kind of where some of the work ethic came from?
yeah, I mean, we did have chores. I had a list every Tuesday. I had to take out the downstairs trash. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, but I remember that one. And I had to do every weekend. I got an allowance. I got paid for that. And then because my dad owned his own business and was a general contractor, I mean, there was always stuff during the summers. He'd swing back by the house about 9:30 in the morning after already putting in like 4 or 5 hours of work, because in Arizona it gets so hot, everybody starting like 4 a.m. He'd swing by at like 8, 9, 10, and if I wasn't up doing something, had a plan for the day, going to Sunsplash with my friends or going here there, he's like, "Hey, hop in the truck," and that just meant like, you're gonna go with me till dark, and you're gonna go dig holes, and then I'm gonna have you fill them back in. pick up trash at the job site. Every time we'd roll up to a job site, he built a ton of gas stations during that time. I'd be looking for the big dump pile of all the drywall and 2x4s and all the cans of everything that people drink in the trash. And then I look at where the dumpster is, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be my first task, is getting the wheelbarrow. And then I'd quickly scan, is the Bobcat on site? Because he had a Bobcat that was at different job sites. And if it wasn't there, it meant wheelbarrows just back and forth. And so I would say I was a pretty like obedient kid too. So when he had me do something, I wasn't like, no, I'm not doing it. I never like really stood up to him. It was more of a respect thing. Like, okay, this sucks. And I didn't like, I had an opinion. He wasn't like a taskmaster, but I just was like, okay, I'm just going to get it done. Now I had a brother who was 2 years older that would do that fighting for me. And I'd kind of like see how far he would take it. And then when he failed, I'm like, all right, let's go get this trash pile done. But
Like, well, that didn't work. he
yeah,
got
like, yeah,
he got more work. So
yeah.
no,
So yeah, it probably stemmed from some of that for sure.
yeah, I think it's the everyday things, right? Like they add up over time. They're little things that our parents can gift to us, and that's why I think as we talk through some of our business experiences, now we're getting to the point too where we can share with some of these young parents, young dads and moms who are building businesses. It's like, how do we also build the next generation, to like, look, home services, it's not going anywhere. When we say that, it's roofing, it's solar, it's alarms, it's satellites, it's fiber, it's pest control, like all of these industries that are the backbone of what is going to essentially still be there even with AI. And
Yeah.
so we need people who can go out and work with their hands and can, talk to somebody face to face and have a conversation. When is that going to go away, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's so many industry, electrical HVAC, like there's so many that AI is not going to touch. You come from a tenure of that same space of door to door and hustle and grit and all of the home services stuff. So I'm curious to hear some of your story. I know we've talked a ton, obviously now working together over the past 6 months, but I don't know if I've ever heard like your true like origin story of, because I know you did pests, but I'm like, I didn't know you did some of these other things. So tell me kind of like, when did you start? How did you get your start in home services and sales?
Yeah. So first off, when I was 16, my scout troop did sprinkler blowouts, and we did lawn aeration, right? And we would go and do that, and it would pay for summer camp and whatever that we had to do for scouting. And then when I turned 16, we just didn't do it anymore. And I was like, why are we not doing it? Like, we were making so much money. And so I asked for the list. I was like, do we still have a list of all the customers? And so I asked for the list. So this is like the original lead enrichment. And they gave me the list. And then me and my best friend, we went and asked his dad for a loan. We purchased a aerator, like an aeration machine. And it was this big, clunky piecer that like we even dropped it. We dropped it out of the back of our truck once, and it still worked. Um, like made of like pure steel.
Right.
The little
Okay.
nodule, I even remember like where you turn it off. It broke off. It was a metal piece, and this is when I first learned that a spark plug with a metal piece is not a good idea. So it doesn't work well to turn it off that way. Um, but yeah, we built a business around that, and I kind of got the bug, So between that and my paper route, and then I served a mission in Germany. I went to Berlin, Germany, and knocked doors and talked to people, and absolutely loved that experience. With just, yes, there was the grind and stuff, but what I really fell in love with is the opportunity to impact the other people that were out there, right? So there's these other
Like
men
the
and
homeowner
women.
side, like the actual homeowner, the other people as in the other reps.
The other, so on the mission, it was the other missionaries. So like
Okay.
the men and women who went out to serve as missionaries, my joy came from serving them. And so yes, I loved the people, and I loved, what I was teaching at the time, but I really loved to work with the the great men and women who went out there to sacrifice 2 years of their life, and who it was really difficult for them. And it wasn't, I'll be honest, it wasn't super hard for me. Like it was actually easier than the life that I was living before, right? Like, so serving my mission was like a joy. So when I came home from that, and I had friends that were going to do door to door. This is how old I am. We started in alarms that were still wired. So like these are not like wireless alarms. Like we had technicians that were
Yeah.
drilling holes and actually running wires for ADT alarm systems. And just like out of the gates, I sold four my first day. Had no idea what I was doing. I probably didn't tell them what I should have, right? But I
Okay.
sold I think 11 or 12 that first week, kind of coming out of the gates as one of the top rookies. And I think what came naturally to me from the beginning is also what became the challenge, is that I was good from the beginning. And so like that actually became a really, really big challenge for me, was like the good to great thing, right? Where it's like, how do I get past good? Because I'm good.
Right.
I see these guys that are great.
Do you remember a moment where you kind of realized when you realized that, and how did you kind of evolve from that? Because you can stay in that goodness for a long time, and you get the praise from other people. I'm sure selling for your first day, dude, you were just like and everybody wanted to ask you how to do it, and they projected your summer and all this money, and you're just like, dude, this feels great, and it doesn't challenge you, right? It kind of promotes like, dude, you're good where you're at, and just kind of, not that you shouldn't like keep doing it and keep the momentum, but do you remember like ever like when it dawned on you like, dude, I'm just like good, I'm like average, or I'm a little bit above average, but, and how did you expand that?
I think it was my first day doing pest control. So this isn't a normal direction that people go in, but the result from that summer, I sold 120 alarms and I made a $2,000 back end check.
Hell
And
yeah.
so like, yeah, so from that, that paid for my wedding and everything. And so I was shocked at that result. And so I'm like, well, this isn't working, at least not with this company, this industry. So I went into pest control, and I showed up to that season late. I joined, the team late. They were already out on the doors. I've never sold pests before. I've never, like, I didn't know what to do. I found some slicks in the apartment after I, got off the plane, found some slicks, and then I went out and knocked near the apartment. And this guy, I remember this guy was like, it was like one of my first doors, if not the first door. And he's like, pest control? And I'm like, yeah, this is in Houston, Texas.
Ooh, let's
And
go.
he's like, dude, I gotta show you this. And so he takes me in, and he has ants in his bedroom that are coming, coming through the wall, basically, like there's this, granulars and stuff. And I'm just like, man, yeah, that's a common house ant. And
Yeah,
we see these all the time.
those are the army ants for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So I made something up. And so to get to your point, it's like I saw then that I'm like, okay, naturally I can just kind of get people to, really get excited about what I'm excited about. But the difference is like, how do I think like you, I'm like, if I go and I do this every single day, and even if I sell a ton of these, I'm still going to hit a wall. Like there's still going to be this barrier. And I thought this really early on during those first couple weeks of pest control, that I was like, I need to build big teams. I need to go into a leadership role to where I'm getting overrides, I'm, recruiting. And so that for me, that was the realization of like, I can only do so much as one person. And it actually was like hard that first year because I didn't have time to like bring out a team or anything. And so I
Right.
was almost like kicking myself the whole time of like, I can't earn more than I can earn,
Yep. It's just
so that was,
you
that
and
was
the
a shift
door.
for me. Yeah. Did you go through the
So,
same kind of thing?
well, so that first summer I just knocked and did my thing and had no idea. I had a 20% pay scale. I was chasing the pay scale all summer, checking it, trying to hit that next benchmark. I think I got to 28%, but because of my back end, the cancellations, it bumped me backwards. So like if you hit 180 sales, whatever, but then like based on what was paid out, it like retroed forwards and backwards. So it kind of compounded against me. And my back end check, I remember getting it. I thought it was going to be around $10,000 was my guess, and so I got it. I'm like $16,000. I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is amazing. Like, holy cow! I'm like so freaking pumped. And all this is happening in like a millisecond. And then you realize it's $1,600. And you're like, what the heck, son? You reach out to the company, they send you some spreadsheet. I'm like, I'm gonna pound the phones, call all these people, get them to pay their bills. There's all these like delinquent people and all stuff. And I'm like, looking back though, it's funny. The guy dropped me off in 30-year-old hood in pest
Yeah.
control. Like, come on, bro. I was still slaying. He was driving across, 5 minutes away to the new builds.
Brand new. Yeah.
And I had just had no idea. And I would go toe to toe with him every day. This was his second year, my first. And he always was like, he'd get me in the car for lunch and like, did you get one? I'm like, yeah, every day. And he's like, dude, every freaking day. I think it was just like more of a shock to him because he was putting me in this just crappy hood. I just had no idea. And so I think coming out of that, I was just like, cool. Like my evolution of this is to like do that again, but also manage other people. And I never was afraid to like outwork or go toe to toe or like put in the long hours or like show value to like my teammates, like you said, other missionaries. And so it just was like the natural evolution of like, I just want to serve and give and help. And if I'm doing it, I'm going to get a million people to do it with me. And I pivoted so fast into satellite that, you know, that first year I recruited
Momentum.
maybe 10, 15 guys into satellite and got paid zero overrides, didn't understand the industry at all. I just was, the owner was like, dude, if you work hard, then I'll make you an owner in a year. So I just like put my head down and went to work, got paid $0 on hundreds of overrides or hundreds of sales. But I didn't even know to like really ask for that. It was just kind of like a loyal person was like, cool. He said he'd give me equity in a year from now. So I'm kind of like banking on that. But between now and then, this is
I
what I
think
have to do to earn that. And so,
I think yeah, there was two things that were happening during that time. Is one, I honestly think that the young leaders didn't really know, they didn't really have a good process to give overrides, and they had to build these businesses, from scratch. And so I'll give them, the benefit of the doubt in saying that
a
they
little
probably didn't
grace.
know. Yeah, some grace there of figuring out the industry. But now people are really educated, and you should know that you should be compensated for those leadership and recruiting efforts. And so
Yeah.
luckily we're not
Yeah.
seeing that as often.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about chasing the pay scale and not trying to negotiate the world, especially going into your first summer. If you're listening to this and you're going into your first summer, I understand like wanting to like value your time and stuff, but I truly believe that if you go and negotiate the world and leverage scarcity minded leaders who are like, oh, if you're going to leave, I'll just keep giving you more and more and more percentage or whatever it is to like try to keep you. And you bounce between companies and opportunities to try to like get the most out of your first, maybe even second summer and not get paid kind of like what you're really worth. I think you miss out on the mindset of true ownership, meaning if you all of a sudden negotiate some huge comp plan at year one, when you go into year two, you're going to sell less if you're managing people, but the override isn't big enough to compensate for the deduction in your sales. If you sell 100, 200, let's say 300 sales your first summer, that's awesome. But the next year, if you manage, sometimes it's hard to hit that 300 because you're serving and giving and trying to help your other guys. And so you sell 200. So you lose your compensation, your percentage on 100 deals, and your team goes and does 500 or 1,000 sales, but the 1,000 times the smaller override doesn't equate to the 100 you lost. You start to justify and almost like, oh, these guys are annoying. Like, these guys are stealing from me. Like it wasn't worth it. Like all the recruiting I did and what you fell in love with and I fell in love with was like serving and giving and trying to help those people win. And I feel like you almost start to like hate is a strong word, but you start to what's the word? Like you start to like
Present.
resent them and you're like,
Mhm.
and it's like it's because you were paid so high so early that you didn't go from 20 to 30 to 40 and then you start managing a team and it's like it kind of grows with you and it's kind of how it's designed to be. That being
Yeah,
said, like I understand the guy that wants to just go like, I don't know, try to get the biggest numbers ever, do it for 2 years and get out or something. But
I
um,
understand that more now than I ever did before, because it was almost like culturally, there were guys that always did that. They were just like, no, I don't want to lead anything. I just want to go out and hit my numbers. And a lot of times they were making more than some of us because they're just hitting their numbers. So, and then that's not talked about very often, but everybody has a different
yeah, but
path.
you're not building anything. You're
Yeah.
building your own.
You're
You're
hunting
building
every
your own
year.
job, and it just
Yeah.
depends. If you're gonna do it for 2 years, that's different than if you're like I'm gonna stick with this. And I think no one really helps you define that early on because it's such a hard industry. And it's so just so tough that it's hard to vision yourself doing it for 10 years in year one. That being said, like you you kind of just create a job, and yeah, you're around the brotherhood, but like no one's relying on you, so you just got to go do your 300 deals and go home for the summer, and it's just kind of I think it's kind of lonely.
Empty. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
empty. Yeah, and we know like there's great people that talk about this at the industry, right? Like once they figured out leadership. But the other thing is like it's just personal development and personal growth. Like for example, and we'll talk about this probably on the next episode of how RepCard came to be and all that. But the main thing today is like this is called the Booma effect. And so like we've got these great stories and we've got these great experiences and we'll continue to share those. We're going to hear from from other people. But I'm curious, like rounding out this first conversation, building RepCard, we talk about the Booma effect, the boomerang. Where did that come from? And, how has that guided you to this point?
I think the boom effect, I didn't call it that obviously, but it started early on as a kid watching my dad give and serve and love on other people. People in our church, people in business. Like I rode next to my dad in a truck for hours during those summers. I'd go with him to stores, to gas stations, to wherever, and people would see him and just light up. And his name's Kerry. Hey, Kerry, what's up? And we'd sit there and talk, and 20 minutes later we'd leave, and he's like, I have no idea who that is. I can't remember his name, or I know him from somewhere. And it's like, but these people adored him and just wanted to like be around him and just say what's up. They it was impressive. It was, and I was like, man, how does he do it? In my head it was like, what is up with this guy? Like anywhere I went, as I got into like youth sports and hanging out in junior high, I'd go to people's house. Oh, who are your parents? Oh, Carrie and Tam. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And it was just like, whoa, like I'm so grateful that I get to say my dad's name and people just light up. And it just, I think, was subconsciously like brewing inside of me, like that's what I want. I want to serve and give and help others. So when my name comes up, it's not just like, oh, that guy, and I think there's a fine line there with doing it for the right reasons. My dad truly did it to just give and serve versus like hoping that people like gave his name a shout out. um, but that I think was kind of like where it started in my heart, and then as it evolved into to door to door and managing people, and then ultimately RepCard, our first initial product was a digital business card, which if you think about a business card, just the concept of it. It's meant so that you can meet somebody new and give them your information, which is like the origin, the beginning of a new relationship. And so seeing my dad do this forever, I just believe that a new relationship should start with finding a way to serve and to give the other person. Like, how can you serve or help them get what they need or what they want out of life or the transaction or whatever. And so RepCard had been around a year and a half, and we had a logo that was like an R and a C. And I'm like, I want to change this because one day the company may not be called RepCard. We may change the name. Like, and it just like the boomerang concept kind of came to my mind. Like, man, you put out good things in the world. You take care of your family, your wife, your kids, your people, your employees, your customers, like that intimate group that you have surrounding you, your community, and like good things will always come back. They just always find a way back. And there's karma and the golden rule and these other concepts. It just kind of like, for my business, was like, what's a symbol of that? And the boomerang was that. And so since then, we've just doubled down on that and kept talking about it and making it part of our culture. You can see it on the sign behind me. This is in my office. It's on like obviously all our hats. And it's just a matter of making that actually a real thing that you live by. So it's been cool to see my kids, even they'll come home from school and they get some art project assigned to them, or they're in art class, third grade, second grade, first grade, those young years, they get to kind of like create whatever they want. And they're like, Dad, look, I made a boomerang. And on the boomerang, it says, be kind. And it just like makes me melt. I'm just like, if there's nothing else, like my kids are learning that the Booma effect is a real thing, and
Yeah,
what it means. And hopefully they internalize it. So that's
yeah.
kind of the origin of the Booma effect.
I've noticed there's a lot of home service and a lot of podcasts out there, and they're talking about the grind and the hustle, and you kind of brought this up at the beginning, Brad. Um, but there's not a lot of people challenging that model itself, right? Challenging the systems, challenging the culture, challenging the outcome, and doing it without burning bridges, which is what we've both successfully been able to do throughout our career. And we always say, don't burn a bridge because you might cross it twice. And I can't even tell you how many times that's happened, I'm sure, in both of our careers. And so this podcast is going to pick that fight. Like, we are going to model this after, doing something different and doing good, and knowing that that'll come back to us. And so this is for home service operators, company owners, sales managers who want to build something that lasts and not something that just lasts for a summer. We'll start announcing the guests that are upcoming. We'll probably do a couple of these together, and then we'll get some great guests on. And if you're interested in being on the Booma Effect, if you have similar stories, if you have similar experiences, and you like doing good, we would love to have you on. And so, reach out to us. But we appreciate everybody joining and getting to know a little bit about our stories. Can't wait to hear from yours.
Let's go. See you on the next one.